Yeah, thank you so much for that introduction, Marnie, and for all of you who have decided to spend your time in this way. Yeah, yeah, there's so much to say, and hearing that description, read back aloud. Um, yeah, yeah, there's a lot there. And yes, and after a sit, I'll offer some reflections on this theme, and then there will be some time for your reflections and questions as well. But first, I just want to say hello, and I'm calling in from the unceded land of the Lenape and Canarsie people, also known here as Brooklyn, New York. And I'm coming from uh, rich traditions and different ethnic backgrounds, situated in southwestern Uganda, and these people are very rooted and alive in their cultural upbringing. And while I've grown up in the United States, that too lives in me, and I bring it as an offering to you. And certainly here in the Sangha, coming with the practices and teachings of the Buddha and all of the people who have carried those teachings forward and have offered them, and they've changed my life as well. And so coming with many rich traditions, named and unnamed, I can't name them all, but just wanting to note that that all of you are welcome, and I hope that what I bring too is of support to you in your practices and inquiry as we practice together. And so just initially inviting us into some formal meditation practice. And so inviting you into a posture that feels supportive for the body, that feels comfortable, even if that's possible for the body. Allowing the body to be at ease in the ways that we can offer that for some meditation practice, about 25 minutes or so. And so whether that's sitting, standing, or lying down, there's some other way of being, really allowing the body to sense into the support that's available. Inviting the body to release into that support, whatever that might mean. Noticing the contact, what you're sitting or lying down on, maybe standing on. Is it hard, soft, cool, warm? And just noticing those contact points of the body, and stability, and steadiness. And also noticing the movement, the breathing, maybe the pulsing body, the blood moving. Maybe you're still situating the body, the arms in motion, feet in motion, eyes. Maybe there's movement of the wind on the skin, sounds around you. Just noticing this stillness and this motion here in relationship to one another, co-creating each other. And as you might be noticing change, the movement of things around you, in you, you can maybe notice the space, both internally, the belly moving, the space inside the body, space inside the chest as you breathe. And of course, this space externally, outside of the body, allowing the body to move into space. If there's a habit of constricting or making the body smaller, allowing the shoulders to be wide, the ribs to be wide, the hips to be wide, the legs to move away from the torso, and just taking up more space, allowing the body, the muscles to relax and be at ease. Orienting the attention toward an easeful body, heart, mind. It can move into space, internally, externally. Find support and resting. Not pushing away from experience or grasping on to anything. Just being with. Finding a balance in the midst of movement and change and ease. Noticing the attitude of the mind. If the invitation of ease is not so readily available, just noticing what is here. And can that be here too, without any contention, without needing it to be any other way, just for now. And simply continuing this practice of bringing the mind, the attention back to rest, in an easeful mind, heart, body, space, wherever the attention can feel restful, whether it's the movement of the sensations of breathing, or the contact of the body with whatever you're sitting or lying down on. And maybe it's the changing nature of sound, the sensations of air on the skin. I'm just inviting you to notice what's here, what rest is available, with curiosity and attention. Thank you for your practice. Yeah, just allowing yourselves to reorient into the space that you're in, and also to the screen if that's where you'd like to put your attention. And taking time to wiggle the fingers, toes, move the body. And so today, I'll be reflecting a bit on equanimity, the wisdom of equanimity. And yeah, this is something, as I was reflecting on it, and I have been reflecting on it, I realize this is in part kind of maybe a larger piece of what drew me to the practice. Kind of these teachings, particularly from Thich Nhat Hanh. And it wasn't necessarily the teachings themselves, but the demonstration of them, like what it looked like in the world, that really impacted me, because I was curious about being in the world in a particular way, because it can be hard to be in the world sometimes. And as an adolescent, I was trying to figure a lot out. What does it mean to be in a world that has the 10,000 joys and the 10,000 sorrows, right? But before I get into maybe too much into that at this moment, I just wanted to start with a story that maybe we can relate to, and maybe I'll reference again and again as I continue to reflect. But so it starts with my nephew, who's 2.5, and I was with him last weekend, and I have a feeling, whether or not you are a parent or have been around a lot of children, you might have seen this, even if in a movie or in passing at a grocery store or out in the world. But there was a moment, I had given him this beautiful piece of grass. It's beautiful, just a piece of grass that was beautiful, I think, objectively. and I gave it to him. It was a gift. He was in love with it, and we were walking with it. It was like his flower that he was very happy to be with, and we were walking home, and at some point he dropped it, and I didn't notice when this happened, and neither did he, but he noticed after it had happened. And this piece of grass was lost. And so he was looking frantically, and it was nowhere near us. And so he just started crying, right? And so are you able to hear me okay? Okay. So he just started crying and crying and crying. And and then he was looking around crying, and then he reached up to take my hand, and we continued walking home. And I was like, I'm so sorry you lost your piece of grass, do you want a hug? He's shaking his head, no, just crying and walking. And I would follow his instruction, and as I was reflecting on equanimity, I was like, oh, like this one, it's like a developmental kind of milestone in a child, right? Like they have their full tantrums, or they're fully embodied and, on the ground screaming. And then there's like time, and it goes back and forth, of course, even with us as adults, maybe, like where it's like, oh, this is happening, I have feelings about it, and something else is happening. We're also walking home, right? So we continue with the other things of life as we have these emotions. Right. And I thought that this was really beautiful, right? Like it's on this spectrum of equanimity, right? So there's like, there's a connection with the emotion, there's a feeling of it, and there's a bit of a broader perspective, a wider perspective of, this is part of a larger thing that's happening. It's not just me and my piece of grass, and where did it go, and it was mine, and it was beautiful, and I loved it. It was that, and we're also going home, and there's other, there are other things that we're going to do. And, it's okay that I've lost this grass. Sometimes we lose grass, we lose a lot of things. And, it's okay to be sad. We talk about emotions a lot with our toddler. Well, he's my nephew, but our toddler, my family. And emotions are a part of life. And so he's okay with being sad as well. And so we're walking and he's crying, and it's okay. And this happens other times too, like when he's going to bed, right? We're playing, it's time to get ready to go to bed. We don't want to go to bed yet because we're playing. So there are tears, and then there's cleaning up while there are tears. There's going to, he will walk himself to get changed, change his diaper while there are tears, getting, like getting dressed and everything. Tears and right, tears and so, yeah, this is what came to mind as I was continuing to reflect. And so what is equanimity? The Buddha spoke of it in several different ways. This is part of the Brahma Viharas, right? These boundless heart qualities. It's part of, it's one of the awakening factors, qualities of mind, and an awakened being. Equanimity is on the list of the paramis, the perfections, these qualities that one cultivates perhaps over lifetimes, that allow us to have access to these awakening factors and freedom, right? It's this wholesome mind state that we can have during formal meditation practice as well as in our daily lives. Right. And so I'll mostly be talking about equanimity as we might relate to it in our daily lives, but it's certainly, rich territory and the formal meditation space as well. So, equanimity is the steady heart, the steady mind quality that allows us to see clearly because things are steady, right? And appreciate the full range of experience, the full range of what is known. Right. So my experience of it is that a spacious, balanced way of being that's free from clinging, free from, pushing away what I don't want, free from grasping on to what I do. It's free from any of that, or it doesn't have much of it anyway. And, it's grounded in this understanding of karma, of this law of cause and effect. This is because that is, right? This is not because that is not, right? But when I say that, it sounds quite simple, but it's quite complex, right? There are so many causes that bring something into existence, and there are so many causes that bring so many other causes into, or causes and effects, right, into existence. And so it's this complex kind of process, karma. But equanimity does ground itself both in the knowing that there are so many things that have contributed to this very moment, and the not needing to know what we don't know, right? This ability to let there be the unknown, let there be the mystery of what we can't grasp with our minds, or what we just simply don't have access to in a moment, right? That's part of this non-clinging. And so when equanimity is spoken of, there are sometimes, these misconceptions or misunderstandings that can be linked, in my view, are linked often to this word that's used of like it's detached. Equanimity is detached in a certain way, which it could, it's a fair translation, but I think this word detached kind of takes us away from actually living and being in the experience of life, and like allowing ourselves to have these emotions, which I think can be dangerous actually, and not what the Buddha was pointing to, right? So, when that word is used, it's usually supporting this idea of stability, of being unmoved, not the toddler that's, throwing themselves around because they're so moved by their emotions. But, my understanding is a bit different from that, right? This kind of stoic, separate from the world experience, but one that is in experience, right? As the Brahma Viharas are pointing to, an open heart that's boundless, that has contact with experience, right? that we can rest in being with the vastness of all that is there, with this larger perspective, and actually be touched by it, and also remain steadfast, right? So emotions, the pleasant and the unpleasant emotions we might have are sometimes thought of as problems in and of themselves that we have, right? And I guess I offer that they could be seen as messengers. They could be seen as informing us about our feelings, informing us about our thoughts in relationship to what is happening, right? So these emotions might be showing us our perceptions of what's happening and our perspective, right? Because each of us, right, as I, kind of put forward, right, like we come with these different experiences, these different lineages, these different practices, these different perceptions of a given moment, these different perspectives of what might be happening. And this is information, right? This is informing an experience. But it's not all of the experience, right? And this is what equanimity is maybe allowing us to open into. And emotions are an important, part of our, it's an important dimension of our lives. They allow us to know the world, ourselves, one another in a relational, beautiful way, I'd offer. And so emotions themselves are not to be moved away from. And equanimity I offer is about the relationship we are into the experience, right? So it's pointing to, how identified we are with these emotions, how much we've allowed ourselves to widen into this perspective or perception of like, oh, this is happening. These are messengers. And, sometimes life is this way and there's more, right? Which is why it's kind of helpful for me to talk about a toddler, because then it's not so personal. We could talk about a toddler who's throwing themselves around, but it's a little bit more, touchy when I say, oh, I throw myself around on the ground and thrash, or, I am, so identified. But maybe we don't look as dramatic as a toddler might, but we certainly can feel so identified. And sometimes we don't even notice the identification. But with equanimity, this invitation of actually seeing things creates some space that allows us to be with in a different way, right? So the times that we're fully identified with emotions, and the stories that go along with them and the way that we feel, can dictate a lot of our experience. And then there are the times when we can simply allow. Right. And the times that we allow are the times that we can perhaps see a bit more clearly a full range of what's happening. Right. And an example of this might be when we're irritated. Right. A simple example of, a more personal experience. Right. Like we might be irritated during the day when we're talking to somebody. And there are a lot of different outcomes of this. Right. Like we could not notice and be fully identified and kind of give an irritable response, right, to whomever we're speaking to. Or, right, we notice we're irritated, we're talking to somebody, we could pause and be like, oh, why am I feeling this way right now? And inquire about the reason or the cause of this irritation without necessarily responding again in an irritable way. Or we might actually be irritated and be like, oh yeah, I'm feeling irritated, you say, like internally, and it's like, oh, I really didn't get much sleep last night, or it's really time for lunch and I'm kind of hungry and I don't want to be talking to this person, or I'm in physical pain and I just don't have energy to be talking to somebody right now and I'm feeling irritated, right? But in that, right, there's this separation, a larger understanding, some clarity, and we're not thrusting the irritation onto this other person. And we're also not judging ourselves in that moment. We're actually looking at the causes and conditions for this irritation, right? That's separate from who we are, what we are in a particular moment, right? And then, there's like this possibility of like, we're talking with somebody, we're feeling irritated, and they might be the cause of the irritation, right? Like that is something that happens in the world, right? And that shouldn't be ignored. And, maybe they're saying things that are, that we might disagree with kind of fundamentally. And so how can we invite ourselves to pause in a moment so that we might be balanced and steady and touch into, right, our practice enough so that we can respond in a way that's in an alignment with our values, and commitment to not harm, if that's one of your values, right? And so in these moments, right, like I can zoom out and ask the question, so why are we practicing? Why are we engaging in this practice, these practices? And so you might have, personally many answers, and I might have personally many answers. But when we think through the Buddhist perspective, right, the Buddha offered these teachings as a pathway to transform our heart and our mind, right? And this is a transformation of karma. This is a karmic transformation, right? So we're cultivating changes to our habitual thoughts, our habitual actions and behaviors, and intentions in the world, right? To alleviate unnecessary pain and suffering that we're actually generating unknowingly, right? So if this is what's being offered to us, right? When I think of like, okay, if that's the invitation, and I'm contemplating equanimity with you, right? I think of Thich Nhat Hanh, right? And he spoke very clearly, and at times forcefully, against the war in Vietnam, right? And he was committed to non-harm, committed to understanding the extreme delusion that was playing out in the war, in the form of war, right, in the world. Thich Nhat Hanh, he was grounded and clear in his expression of disapproval, right, of the continuation of violence and destruction, that all parties involved were initiated in, right? It wasn't like one side or the other. It was just like all of this death and destruction is unnecessary. It needs to stop, right? And so, and he certainly received societal consequences from his actions, right, across the range, right, of what that might mean, right? And he's, I think, a beautiful example because he saw something in the world that he felt was not acceptable, right? And he, of course, had many strong emotions regarding this, which were appropriate, right? He was connected in that way. And he also took the time and the energy to contemplate the causes and conditions of the circumstances, right? And his ultimate solution was to practice, mindfulness and cultivate a stability of heart and mind, and then to engage and speak out against the violence, right? And this is a continuous practice, right, that he spoke about and wrote about a lot, right? This was not a one time, I just sit and then I'm good for the, the remainder of my life. No, but he kept sitting, he kept being activated by emotions, he kept inquiring, and he continued to be dedicated, right, to his formal practice, and the dedicated practice of wise speech and wise action in the world. And as I continue to reflect, Thich Nhat Hanh was able to speak so clearly in part because of his focus on the Dharma, right? He was not so focused on these personal concerns about his reputation, or avoiding further pain and loss, because what we can learn from the Dharmas, the teachings of the Buddha, right, is that when we're one of the things that can get in the way of developing equanimity and a lot of these wholesome qualities is a focus on sometimes what is called the 8 worldly winds or the 8 worldly concerns. And these can make us a bit unstable or unbalanced if we're oriented toward them. And they're often related in this feeling of hope and fear, right? And so the 8 are pleasure, pain, gain, loss, praise, blame, fame, and disrepute, right? So we can be oriented to these 8 in terms of hope for pleasure, gain, praise, and fame, or fear of pain, fear of loss, fear of blame, fear of a bad reputation, right? But when we're not so focused on these, the wisdom of equanimity can know these worldly concerns, right, as impermanent experiences, right? That grasping for, what we want or pushing away, right, this hoping for and fearing of, like this actually causes suffering, right? And so to be less interested in these things, to be disinterested, to not cling to these things, offers us a measure of freedom, and offered certainly Thich Nhat Hanh a measure of freedom and the additional energy to focus on things that might matter more, right, than those worldly concerns. And so to truly not be afraid of pain, of blame, of loss, and of a bad reputation, right, while pursuing a higher good can kind of unhook us from what the constraints of conforming to the habits and rules that are often unspoken, sometimes spoken in society, are, right? And some of them, many of them, maybe we have even internalized. And so, some of these messages, right, of actually grasping for these things, right, are in direct conflict with cultivating equanimity, right? So, as was said in the description, right, like dominant culture tells us that feeling bad is bad, right? And we want to feel bad as little as possible, right? And, we want to feel good as much as possible, right? And this is causing us stress, right? And so it's causing us stress because it's encouraging us to deny a lot of our experiences, right? And the Buddha taught us that denial or delusion, consciously or unconsciously, actually causes more pain. And so I was saying at the beginning, right, like the 10,000 joys, the 10,000 sorrows, these are kind of facts of life. And they're for us to simply know. To see clearly is to know that they are happening, that they do exist, right? And so we will experience them. And to experience them is to live life, right? And to hope for only joy in life is to negate half of life. And to fear sorrow is to fear half of life, right? And that's not fair to any of us, I'd like to offer, and when we're honest with ourselves, I think, at least when I'm honest with myself, I know that sadness, that sorrow, that grief, anger, pain, and the 9,000 other things of sorrow have actually offered a depth in life that makes me more kind in the world, right? Just as joy and happiness and all of the other joys can also offer a depth of life that offers like this possibility of us being in relationship in a different way. And so to understand intimately that life simply is, that life and death simply are, right? Like it's not that we delight in sorrow. It's not that we push away the joy. It's that we accept the joy as it is, fleeting, right? Impermanent. However long it may last, it will change, right? And that there is the inevitable loss, that our loved ones are here impermanently as well, and we will lose them or they will lose us. And that's not a mistake, however painful that is, right? This is the intimacy of life. And the wisdom of equanimity allows us to know this and to feel this, to be with the emotions and thoughts that come along with these experiences without clinging. Actually, to say that I shouldn't be sad is to push it away. That is part of the definition of clinging, is aversion, right? Is pushing away. So to feel sadness, to feel loss without clinging allows it to actually have its full natural process with an open heart. And that it's unpleasant, that it aches, that it's tender is not wrong, is not bad. It's perhaps exactly the way it should be, the way it is. And that's okay. And that informs how we can see the world again as it is, clearly, right? These are the things that happen to a human heart, that are of life. And so we see it in our experience, we experience it, and we see it in others' experiences, and know that that too is okay. And we can be with them in appropriate ways, but it's certainly not wrong. And this is part of the balance, part of the stability, to experience joy freely, to experience sorrow freely, to live fully, right, and freely with equanimity. And so, you know, I've noticed that cultivating this attitude in life has offered me a particular type of like inner confidence or trust in myself, knowing that I can experience these these kind of dynamics, the dynamic depth and breadth of life. Often there's a fear of being with that which is painful because there isn't this kind of trust or security in knowing that we can move through it. But this, because it's part of life, you know, I think I'd want to kind of offer this like extended hand, right, of one person who has experienced, you know, sorrow, to say that you know, you aren't alone and we can do it together. It's not that equanimity is inviting us to be these solitary islands, but to experience this kind of inner confidence through moving through allows us to um, both trust in ourselves and others, and being able to be fully in contact with the 10,000 joys, the 10,000 sorrows. And so we cultivate equanimity, you know, as a gift for ourselves and a gift to those that we can offer in the world. And I think, you know, in closing, before I open it up to any reflections or questions, just wanting to offer this other dynamic. You know, I've been speaking largely about, you know, what we see in the world, how we relate to the external world, but it also is really, you know, the same for the inner life, right? That we may find that we have these patterns that aren't so supportive, right? That we might have fear for the emotions that we have, that we might not fully allow ourselves to feel and move through joy, right? That there's somehow this internal distancing or grasping or pushing away from. And this too is part of equanimity practice. You know, equanimity is, yes, what it is, but it's also this ability to see what difficulties we're having in relationship to it, right? So seeing that, oh, I have this joy that I know is joy, but I feel like a little hesitant, like, right? Like, I don't want to fully feel it. I don't want to fully express it. I don't want to share it. I feel very protective of it. I'm somehow making it small. I would like offer, you know, us to inquire, even on that end of the spectrum, right? To inquire into that. How can we actually open our hearts to joy, to feel it freely, to not have a sense of constriction around even joy? And so to reflect on equanimity and to see that is not a failure of equanimity. It's actually part of the practice. It's part of the inquiry. It's part of the invitation to allow the heart to open up, to be in contact with the world, the vast experience of life, in a way that offers kind of this dynamic quality of engaging, you know, both in ourselves and our internal life, and also others in the world. And one more thing before I close is wanting to speak a little bit about thoughts. Thoughts come up internally in this space. Again, how do I want to say it? It's like there's a way that we can be in the world where we're reliant on kind of the stability of others, right, to support us. And again, there's nothing wrong with having support. And there's this possibility for us to cultivate and understand and know and see more clearly if we need that, because we're actually not offering that to ourselves. If we're having kind of negative self-talk, we're having, you know, critical mind that isn't allowing us to have mistakes because they're inevitable, isn't allowing us to be anything other than perfect, there's a way in which we can become aware of that and offer a perspective shift, so that there's this internal safety, this internal knowing that, oh, I can be imperfect. I can be out in the world and make a mistake. And internally, there's there's an acceptance of me just to be as I am, this tender human self that doesn't always know what to do, what to say, how to be. And that too is kind of this folding in, this ability to be with all of the experience of life, and to part of equanimity. And so I'll pause there, but hope that these reflections were supportive for you as you continue to explore equanimity. So thank you for your kind attention. Yeah. And so now we'll be shifting to, welcoming any reflections that you might have. I can see that you're sending things in the chat. I have not followed along as I was speaking, but feel free to offer reflections in the chat, and feel free to raise your electronic hand, which would be at the bottom of the screen under reactions, if you would like to ask a question. And you can also write in a question, and Marnie can offer that to me, as I won't be able to follow it all very smoothly, but just allowing you to, see what might come up for you from these reflections, and feel free to offer a question or reflection that might be supportive. And so Marnie, I'll turn to you as others might be thinking of or writing questions. Is there anything I might respond to?
Yes. So Pat Whitehead said, so it's the clinging to our emotions that causes the suffering that the Buddha and the Dharma invite us to be free from, rather than the suffering brought about by emotions themselves.
That is correct. Yeah. Thank you for that. And this, if you, I forget the name. Was it Peter you said, Marnie?
Pat.
Pat. Okay, I was like, there was a P name. Okay, so yes, Pat. Thank you for pointing this out, because I think this points to, if you've heard of the kind of the teaching on the two arrows, right? There's the first one, which might be, let's say, a broken leg, pain. It's going to hurt. And then there's the second arrow that is unavoidable, or wait, that we can avoid, that we can cultivate and not contribute so much to. And the second arrow is, oh my goodness, why did I do that? I tripped on this rock. Like, how clumsy am I? It's all of these things we add on to the experience of pain that we have. And so this first arrow, let's say it's sadness, right? Let's say it's grief, right? Like, we lost somebody dear to us that we love, and we are sad, we are grieving. This is a natural human response, but then to kind of push away or grasp onto, which can happen in both measures in the throes of grief, that can be a contributing factor to more suffering, more pain than the actual initial emotion itself. And not to say this is easy, it's quite complex, but this is part of the Buddha's teachings. So thanks for asking that, Pat. Yeah, and Victoria, I see your hand, so yes.
Hi, thanks. Thank you for this talk. I unfortunately had another conflicting thing in my schedule, so I don't know if you talked about this already, but I think I heard almost your whole talk. So I have done a number of retreats and things with the Brahma Viharas over the years, and I have always felt that the equanimity for me personally is where I need to start, and then I can bring in the other Brahma Viharas, because I feel like the equanimity gives me balance and the right perspective. But I think unanimously, like every Dharma teacher I've talked to says, oh no, equanimity is like the highest, and it's the ultimate achievement, and it's just before Nibbana, which I know I'm like light years away from. So I'm just curious in terms of, not that they have to be a sequence either. It's just often they're taught that way. Like, you start with metta, then you go to karuna, then you go to mudita, and then you go to upekkha. But I'm just wondering what your take is on that, because to me, it's so central. Like, I feel like even things like self-compassion for me that's inaccessible unless I can start with some kind of equanimity. Like, it is like this is what, this is the situation. And I look at it with equanimity, and then I can have self-compassion that, oh, well, maybe, my actions are related to the fact that this situation was the way it was, and it wasn't under my control. Do you know what I'm saying? I'm not sure if I'm being clear.
Yeah, you're being quite clear. Yeah. Thank you for naming this and asking. I think that you are responding naturally to the way that you are, which I think is perfect, right? That equanimity might come first. It makes a lot of sense. In some of the Tibetan traditions, they actually teach equanimity first. Because they say that equanimity, and I agree, I was going to say, and it's true, but equanimity is in all of the Brahma Viharas, right?
Right.
So that you're kind of feeling and sensing into its presence in the other Brahma Viharas is great, is wonderful. I think that the reason, and a lot of the insight traditions, it is kind of taught last, is because it can be, one, it is tradition, kind of as it has been kind of cultivated over time, but also I think in part it was because to do it first can be a bit more kind of like conceptual and kind of putting it on, rather than kind of the heart qualities of metta, of karuna, of joy can be kind of felt in like the heart space more viscerally. And so to cultivate those qualities, and equanimity has a different feeling to it, like a different kind of Vedana quality. And so it can be a lot more subtle for people to kind of notice and pick up on, and that you've connected with it in a very natural way that actually allows you access to the other Brahma Viharas, I think is wonderful and great. And you might not see it taught very much in that way unless you look at Tibetan traditions, but I think it's perfectly fine that you are kind of following your natural flow. I think it's actually really wonderful that you are. I know it can create some questions, confusion, but I think that it's really important that we trust our own experience, and that's exactly what you're doing. So that makes me happy.
Well, actually, thank you. Actually, that you touched on something really brilliant. So thank you. You're like have a laser. Because I think my approach to everything in life tends to be head, then heart, then body, if I can manage to get the body. But usually somatically, like that's still an area where I am way behind in terms of my practice or whatever. So as you said that, I suddenly had like a flash of insight that for me, maybe that's why that was the easy entry point into the Brahma Viharas, because it is more conceptual, but I can settle into that because that's where I'm the most comfortable. And then the heart can get involved, and then, the body gradually is, trying to catch up. But I appreciate that, because it makes, now I understand. Because I think the pushback that I've received from so many teachers is based on the tradition. And I haven't studied the Brahma Viharas in the Tibetan tradition, so that's really interesting. That'll be good to look into. So thank you. You were really, I feel like you have like laser vision. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for your question, Victoria.
There's a lot happening in the chat, so let me try to work through that. Ray asks, can you talk about equanimity and being with anger during meditation?
Yeah. I wish, Ray, I invite you to raise your hand, because I might not be pointing to exactly what your question is trying to get at, because what comes up when I see this question, being with anger during meditation, it's just that, it's being with. So the experience of like feeling anger, either whether it's body-based or kind of thought-oriented, is just that, it's being with. so so that's kind of like, that's my first response, right? It's like, if we're in meditative practice, a formal practice, and anger is arising, we can simply be with it, know that it's here, know that it's anger, know that it's impermanent, and be with it as it's visiting. And so that primarily, I think, can be helpful when it's like a visceral experience. When it's kind of thought oriented and there are a lot of thoughts spinning out around this anger, like if it's a particular circumstance or situation that's happening, I think that's when there can be, that's why I kind of invited you to raise your hand, because I don't know if it's in the thought realm, but that's when we might kind of question how we're contributing to anger in the moment. And it kind of also, like, it also depends like what the anger is about, right? So I use Thich Nhat Hanh as an example. There's, this example of the Vietnam War. He's like, this is absolutely not okay. He had anger, and he kind of processed it through meditative practice, and then, did things in the world. And so I think the question is, do you want to do something about it? Because sometimes we want to, or we can, or we can't, and that's fine. But it's like, is sitting with the anger exacerbating it continuously through thoughts, or is it allowing it to move in the body, which can be supportive? If it's exacerbating it through thoughts, there's a way in which we might want to unhook from the thoughts and allow for like a kind of a wisdom process to take place. But it really depends on where you are to know what that might look like, or what the circumstances to know what that might look like. But you might be curious about thoughts and how the thoughts are contributing to the anger. And again, not to say that the anger is wrong or bad or needs to go away, but it can be training, and it might not be something we want to continuously sit with. So how can we kind of unhook from feeding it continuously and find another pathway for that energy to move? So I think that's my initial response. And I guess I see there's more in the chat, so maybe it's visceral. So yes, great. Well, thank you, Ray. Thanks for that question. It's a really important one. Yeah. And well, and then maybe now that I saw that it was visceral, maybe I'll speak a bit more about that. So it could be, and allowing it to just be known can be really intense. And, you might sweat, you might cry, you might shake, and that's okay. Again, that's not wrong. But also know when it's time to like stand up and walk and move around. Maybe it's time to use your voice, like vocalizing, whether it's singing, chanting, humming. Like these can also be ways in which we can kind of process it, like a visceral intensity that is anger. So I just wanted to add that as well. Yeah.
It looks like there's a few questions still. I'm going to go with Beth's next, and then we can circle back up to Bartik. Beth asks, I am recovering from sunshiny syndrome, pre-encountering the Dharma. I thought being happy all the time was the goal. Example, toxic positivity, always wanting things to be good, happy, positive. What's something that I can say to myself when I notice falling back into that pattern, or pushing away or ignoring the things I deem negative or bad vibes, etc.?
Yeah, thank you for that question. What comes to mind as I sit with that is maybe not a mantra specifically, and mantras are, I think, can be really helpful, and one doesn't come to mind immediately, but what comes to mind is actually when you're noticing it. Great work. Like what I just did, I kind of paused and I exhaled. And what I realized is in those moments, you might ask yourself a question like, what am I resisting? There might be tension there. There might be something you're pushing away that you're feeling aversive to, that wants to be known. So maybe, I don't know if that's a mantra, but a question that might be useful. What am I resisting? Or what is here right now might be a more neutral way of kind of inviting anything to be known.
And Bartek had hi, thank you for your wonderful reflections on equanimity. Do you ever practice Brahma Viharas with equanimity? If yes, how do you phrase equanimity? Or do you have equanimity mantras you can share with us? And what's your experience been with practicing it in this way if you did? And I don't know if that actually got answered when you were speaking with Victoria, but maybe you wish to say something else here.
Yeah. I think personally, like, yeah, personally, I don't like, I'm trying to think, like formally in a Brahma Vihara kind of practice, the only like phrase that I might use specifically, I'm just kind of going through my memory, that orients toward equanimity is like, this is, and I don't even have it like, but it's something like, it might change in the moment, but something like, it depends on if it's oriented toward myself or another, but like, and this is how life is right now. Something like that. It's just like kind of stating this is how life is, or this is how, this is their life right now. Or this is, their, these are their decisions to make. It's kind of relieving myself from like kind of concern over, a loved one's next decisions that, might, be causing them a lot of stress. It's not up to me to give advice, to dictate their life, but, and this is for them to do. This isn't for me to hold, and I can certainly be there, but it's something either relinquishing kind of my responsibility for another's kind of life and their trajectory, or just allowing myself to rest in what simply is right now, regardless of how it might impact my kind of emotional response. But there are what are they called? Like phrases that people use for equanimity. And for some reason they're like slipping my mind right now, but they have to do with like, this person is the owner and heir of their karma, what they do. Really, it's their life, right? It's pointing to what I just said, but I don't have the phrasing right up on the top of my mind. But it is a practice that you can cultivate. And another thing to look up are the 5 remembrances that can be useful for cultivating equanimity. And these 5 remembrances are things that you can reflect on daily, that are kind of allowing you to be in contact with kind of, the realness of life, of, that I like, old age, sickness, and death are a part of life. I'm not exempt, right? Everyone I love who is dear to me will, I will be separated from at some point. There are 5 of these remembrances that we can just be in contact with, to allow ourselves this practice of, or at least awareness of how much we're grasping on to these different elements of life. And that's, the 5th one is where that 5th equanimity kind of phrase comes from. But I'll let you look those up. I don't have them off the top of my head or in front of me right now. Yeah, but thank you for asking that. Oh, Marnie, you're not muted, or you are muted.
We have Lawrence with the hand up.
Yes. So Lawrence, yes, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Marnie. Thank you, Peace. First of all, I have to say, dear community, I really love it. I know it takes courage, but I really wish when you have a question, you'd come on, and as Peace said, she could give you a much better answer if you dialogue with her. So, okay, remind me, give me a quick definition of Brahma Viharas. And what I was thinking as you gave your answer was that what really challenged me was the whole concept of mudita. That really rocked my world about what I thought was, say, empathy and good listening to others when somebody explained to me about, no, 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 I don't want all your worrying about me is like not what I need. And it's sort of, and then I talked to a Dharma friend and they explained to me about the concept of mudita, which kind of changed everything about what empathy is. Did that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So I'll first respond to, my kind of understanding of Brahma Viharas as a whole, and then I'll touch into mudita a little bit. So the Brahma Viharas are these divine abodes. They're called divine abodes, these resting places, these boundless heart qualities that the Buddha spoke about, that should be cultivated, and we have access to them at all times. Like they're always here. It's how do we touch into them and allow for the causes and conditions to come together so that we actually touch into them more frequently and more naturally and intuitively. And right, these are boundless heart qualities, right? And so the mudita is, and there are 4 of them for those of you who don't know. I'll just name them. In Pali, they're metta, which is often translated to kindness or loving kindness or friendliness. There's karuna, which is often translated to as compassion. There's mudita, which is translated as joy, sympathetic joy, resonant joy, a lot of different iterations of joy. And the 4th one is equanimity, it was upekkha in Pali. And so mudita, well, often number 3, Victoria was like, maybe the numbers aren't as important, but one of the 4, right? Mudita is about joy, is about selfless joy. And selfless joy, I was pointing to, I spoke about, like, can we actually experience fully our own joy, like in an unselfish way? And certainly when another is, having a joyful experience, can we delight in their joy, sympathetic joy? In a selfless way, right? Like not wanting, whatever, their achievement or whatever it might be that they're celebrating, but actually our heart is just resonating openly with the joy that they're experiencing, and we too are fulfilled in that joy. So Lawrence, can you ask the part about mudita again? I just wanted to speak a bit to those, but curious again about what kind of clarification, because I know you spoke about karuna, compassion and joy in the relationship, but I'm wondering if what I just offered helped in clarifying for you.
There's something about unraveling the whole issue of clinging and anger, how these are all tied together. And there's a place of sympathetic joy that's not about clinging or a result, that a dispassionateness that somehow allows you to just sit back and see, okay, this is just, I'm angry or I'm clinging because there's, oh, I want disrepute. Oh, I have this ladder and I want to be the best here. I want, I want something. So for me, what was coming up repeatedly was, okay, when I see the anger, sometimes it helps me to be a little cognitive therapy with it, Buddhist cognitive therapy, and say, oh, yeah, this is my attachment to that ladder again, or I felt disreputed, I felt blamed. Oh, okay. Anyway.
Yeah, anger.
Can I'm just gonna say I've taken enough time, but if you want to respond, but can I just say thank you? And just so other people know they should get in on the good times with you.
Well, thank you, Lawrence. Thank you, Lawrence. I appreciate you, bringing this forward and asking more about it. And I think anger is a big topic that like could have like a whole retreat. Truly, I was going to say a whole talk, but it's like more than that. It's a huge topic to be explored, and yeah, and I think I don't know if we have time for me to touch into it anymore today, but I do want to just acknowledge that it is something to actually be curious about, and maybe I'll offer that this Buddhist cognitive behavioral therapy idea of just thinking about, right, the perspective shifting that you might take, I think is not a bad idea, as long as it doesn't like involve this layer of blaming yourself or actually telling yourself you shouldn't be angry. I think that can be, the second arrow idea of like you're adding on something. But if your aim is to like alleviate the suffering that the anger is causing you in a moment, to take a wider perspective, to widen the angle and the lens of these causes and conditions, if it's somebody else or other people or a situation is involved, you really can think of all of the causes and conditions for a particular moment are not actually about you, and actually unhooking it from like a personal sense, right? Like disidentifying from not necessarily the emotion, like sure the emotion, but like it being about you can start unraveling a bit of how to be in relationship to it. It's usually a lot more complex than our emotions are kind of leading on. And so I guess I'll pause there, but thank you again. Yeah. And Marnie, is there maybe one more question that we might respond to before closing?
Well, people are sharing a lot of love for your teaching and some things about the phrases, the Brahma Vihara phrases. Maybe too much for me to digest and paraphrase, but there's also a conversation about Stoicism. And I'm curious maybe what you might say. I'm trying to find it, but something about Stoicism. Sorry.
Mari, it's Alex's, and it says it feels to me like there are strong parallels between Buddhist equanimity and Stoicism. Do you agree?
Thank you. Thank you for saying that, for bringing it out. And thank you, Marnie, for searching. I know it can be quite the task to go through the chat. It's interesting. Like I would need to read more about Stoicism to have like an informed answer. And I've had conversations with friends about this particular question. And I think the short answer is yes, there is a lot of overlap. I think it's not 100% overlapped at all. But I think that there is some I think there's like overlapping wisdom and then like divergent thinking as well. But yeah, because I actually haven't read about it anytime recently, I don't want to say any of the particulars of more, but I think you might be on to something there, even if it diverges in some ways. Yeah, so thank you for bringing that forward as well. And I think that's all we'll have time for today. So this was my first time being here, as a teacher on Sangha Live, and I really appreciate your attention, your questions, and the reflections that you've had. So thank you. Thank you for participating in this way, and thank you for contributing to this community and practicing together. And if you have found benefit from being here and have the ability to contribute to the platform of Sangha Live and also to my teaching, I would greatly appreciate. Marnie has put in some links in the chat to support in that way, and certainly your presence here is really a gift. And so I hope that you all feel that for one another, and also for me to be here and speaking with you is also an honor. And so in closing, just wanting to dedicate the merit, the good energy of our practice, may it be of benefit for each and every one of you. and all the people you come in contact with, and may it ripple out to all beings everywhere, without exception, that this practice may be a cause and condition for the ease, joy, and well-being of all beings. May all beings know peace, joy, care, and happiness. Thank you all. Take good care.